Of course, last season, the first season for the Oregon Ducks within the Big Ten Conference. This year, year number 2. Over this time, Oregon has been maybe learning some things about the new league that they're playing and maybe some initiations a little bit, maybe some welcome to the Big Ten type of moments. And this was another one of them. Okay, because whether there's been teams like Ohio State or Penn State or Michigan or some of the top teams in the Big Ten, whether they've been that good or whether they've been towards the bottom of the league, every team goes into a 12 o'clock p.m. Eastern game in Evanston, Illinois, and has a performance like this. They have a sleepy start. But if we're going to take a positive away from maybe this sleepy start for Oregon, they found a way to adjust as this game was able to progress. In previous games, the Ducks had these scorching starts. Second play of the game last week, Noah Whittington goes 59 yards for a touchdown, and you got the Autzen Stadium crowd behind you. You found the energy. You found the juice right off the bat. In this game, Oregon sends James Ferguson Reynolds. That's a punter, by the way. We haven't seen much of him. They send James Ferguson Reynolds out at the end of the first drive, and that was very different. There was a lot of parts of this game that were just, that's a little bit different. Ooh, that's a little bit different. Haven't seen much of that from this team. How are they going to get over this this first little roadblock, this second little roadblock, this third little roadblock, and all of that? And all things being considered, I thought Oregon, over those smaller roadblocks, I thought they did a pretty good job at kind of jumping over those as the game was able to progress. Now, we talked about finding the energy in the preview, and I just talked about finding the energy now. There were instances throughout this game, there were plays made throughout this game where Oregon was able to find that energy. You talk about Bryce Betcher's interception. I believe that was their second defensive drive of the game. That led to a touchdown because at that moment in the game, Northwestern's doing some good things on the offensive line. They're doing some good things in the run game. They're moving the football a little bit, and that kind of halted it. There were points where Northwestern was maybe building that momentum a little bit, and the Ducks shut the door and kind of flipped it back the other way. That Bryce Betcher's interception was one of that. You go to the start of the third quarter. Northwestern comes out. Oh, here they go. Looks a lot like the beginning of the game, in the first quarter. Right in the third quarter. They're moving the ball. They're running the football. Offensive line for the Purple Cats. They're getting that push. They're doing their thing, right? And then comes that drop pass. I think it was like a 4th and 9 from the Wildcats. Would have given a first down near the red zone, definitely inside the 30, I think, at that point in time as well. But that failed 4th down. Next play, 66 yards, boom, the other way. There goes De'Aaron Hill. That was a 2-play sequence that I think found a big-time boost and some big-time energy for the Ducks at that point in time as well. And then Jerry Mixon had an interception later in the ball game that led to a touchdown. So just little instances, little roadblocks that they were able to get out of, to be able to jump over, find that energy, and eventually kind of create that gap that they were able to create throughout this game. So you combine the 10,000, 12,000 seat stadium. You combine the sleepy atmosphere, windy. Sounds like it was pretty windy by the lake throughout this game as well. But then, like I was just talking about, the Wildcats' ability to run the ball, eat a lot of time off the clock. Like there were a limited amount of possessions for Oregon in this game. A lot less first quarter, second quarter, first half type of possessions to be able to get a lot of that momentum that they've been able to get early in games than they've had before. So you got to give credit to Northwestern's front to be able to do that. And then, holy crap. Now, this is maybe I did watch the Texas-Ohio State big noon game to start the season, but there were a lot of TV timeouts. There were a lot of commercials. It was very start and stop. Okay, you'd have a punt commercial, you'd have a short drive punt commercial. There was a lot of times throughout this game where Oregon just was not able to get a rhythm. When you combine the sleepy environment, when you combine Northwestern being able to run the football, Oregon not getting into a rhythm early, because from a TV standpoint, okay, like these last few games, Montana State, Oklahoma State. Like if Oregon goes down, they get into the end zone and they do it 1 touchdown, 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns, whatever it is in the first quarter. That allows the networks to take those television breaks at that point in time. But if teams aren't getting out to that fast start, teams aren't getting out to a bunch of those scores, now these producers have to find a way to jam in a lot of these breaks in a one-possession game in the first half to keep the viewer engaged and get the most out of their ads. And that's kind of what happened. So I think you put all of that in a pot, you mix it up, you put it in a pan, I should say. You put it in a pan, you mix it up, you put it in the oven, you pull it out, and that's the recipe for, I think, that little bit of a sleepy start for Oregon within this game. This looked like Northwestern Super Bowl to a certain extent. Northwestern came out. I think they played with a lot of energy early in this game. They played with a lot of fire. David Braun was more aggressive in this game. I think that he's been at other points during his Northwestern career, and it looked like Oregon's first road game against a Big Ten team across 2 time zones with a young team against a scrappy opponent. That's exactly what it was when all was said and done. But they were able to overcome some of these obstacles. They were a much more talented team, and of course you saw that throughout this entire game. Okay, here's the second point. Questionable trenches. I want to start first with Oregon's defensive line, because if I'm looking at like maybe which one is a bigger concern coming out of this game, I'm leaning towards the defensive front. Now, first drive of the first quarter, first drive of the third quarter. Those are ones that really stand out to me. There were certainly other drives where Northwestern had a lot of success running the football. Now, this was the biggest offensive line that Oregon had seen thus far this season. Talking about guys that are 6'5", averaging 6'5", 311 pounds in there. They were able to establish the run. Like guys like I remember seeing Terrence Green getting just driven 3 yards off the football, 4 or 5 yards off the football. Bear Alexander, I remember something from that, him getting knocked off the football quite a bit as well. And then that's where you saw these running backs able to just methodically move the football down the field. The Wildcats top 2 back combined for 112 yards and 28 carries. That's an average of 4.1 yards per carry. They had that long touchdown run at the end of the game as well. So that's something that we saw towards the end of last season. Okay, once again, the Ducks getting the victory, but that Big Ten championship game, Katron Allen, Nick Singleton, they ran the ball really well. Penn State was able to lean up front of the offensive line. Okay, they were able to have a lot of success running the football. Stopping the run was an emphasis. Bryce Betcher said it. Dan Lanning said it. A lot of people said it leading up to this, throughout fall camp, leading up to this season. This is not, the best indication coming out. Now, maybe a little bit of inconsistency. There were times where they were able to get into the backfield. They were able to penetrate. They were able to get some tackles for loss, certainly in there as well. But that's something that I think Oregon fans and the Oregon coaching staff, they're going to circle that. You see that? We have to get better at the line of scrimmage. This is a really good Oregon defensive line. Okay? And this was maybe, if you want to call it their first true test against the run. I know Montana State liked to run the ball a lot, but that was a smaller, of course, a lower level of an offensive line as well. Let's move to the other side. Let's talk about the Oregon's offensive line right now. I thought they were knocked back at times in pass protection, but you got to give this offensive front, you got to give them the credit. They still got the goose egg in the sack column. They still did enough to allow Dante Moore to be able to fire the ball down the field and have an effective game moving the ball down the field. That, of course, led to some good offensive possessions and some points down the field as well. Then early in the contest, they struggled to run the football. Now, there's a couple of things that I want to tackle with this. Once again, maybe not getting that push up front. These are big guys up front, okay? They had the size advantage up front on the offensive line. So it wasn't that. Like I said, Oregon's defensive line was facing the biggest offensive line that they'd seen so far. That was not the issue. I have to go back and dive into the rewatch and dive into the film a little bit to see exactly what the issue was. But watching this game live, they weren't getting that push to start the game. Now, they did not have Noah Whittington. One thing I've said about Noah throughout this season is he explodes through the hole. He hits the hole really quick, and he's that really good combination of power and speed. He was not available during this game. So you got Jaden Lamar back there. You've got Jay Harris back there. I think Mekhi Hughes only had one carry in this game. When Noah Whittington wasn't playing, and we're seeing Mekhi on the field. He was like if you want to call it a 3A and a 3B with Jay Harris throughout the early part of this game. I'm like, okay, maybe this is the time for Mekhi to really take the bull by the horns and do it, and that didn't happen. That didn't happen throughout the course of this football game as well. So I think it proved Jaden Lamar, and I said this, I think throughout the spring, I said it throughout fall camp, and I'm like, he seems very situational to me. Although he's playing a lot better to start the year, like that's a guy that you need to get him out in space. You kind of need to scheme him open. They say that a lot about wide receivers, but I think when I'm talking about Jaden Lamar, they need to scheme him open with abilities for him to get out in the field and really showcase his speed. Like he's not a guy that you're going to depend on. Now, this is not Oregon's running back room at all this year, but he's not a guy that you're going to depend on to carry the ball 15 times, 17 times, 18, 19, whatever times. He's not going to be a bell cow. That's just not what he's going to be. And I think today was an example of that throughout this contest as well. But the trenches, those are things that are going to be circled going forward, as this was certainly not what maybe you wanted to see in this type of first Big Ten game against a team like Northwestern that's going to be probably towards the bottom of the Big Ten as this season progresses. Now, we take all of that. Some questions, some positives. Let's just get a big macro point to finish off my takeaways. Folks, this was a learning experience. I would much rather have a learning experience winning by 20 than maybe, for example, last year's game at Wisconsin. At 16-13 and a nail biter going down to it. Okay. I said it in my first part of this takeaway segment. Oregon overcoming a lot of obstacles throughout this contest. Dante Moore continuously finding guys down the field when maybe the pocket was shrinking. Maybe the pocket was collapsing a little bit more than it had those first 2 weeks as well. This game, it shows us a lot. I almost would rather have a game. Now, you always want to see Oregon play their best, but I would rather, with Oregon State next week at Autzen, and then, of course, everybody's looking to that 5th game of the year when they play the Penn State Nittany Lions. I would almost rather have a game like this where I know, okay, this, and this we need to work on the defensive line. We need to get better at that. This, and this is what we need to be able to clean up, what we need to be able to fix up front on the offensive line as well, and just the bullet list of things that they need to be able to clean up. You can take a lot more out of this game than you can the last 2 weeks. Last 2 weeks, okay, we just completely trounced somebody. You don't learn anything from that. Whether it's somebody hosting the podcast or whether it's you at your job or whatever it is, you learn more from that feedback when maybe things aren't going completely perfect. So when you get into those situations where you absolutely have to deliver, like Oregon will be in a couple of weeks, you know that that's what you need to be able to work on. And you saw it and you learned from it at this point, and you're going to be able to correct it and go forth and hopefully be a better team when all is said and done. This game is going to allow this coaching staff to really evaluate things and for this team to maybe be better when all is said and done.